Hi, this is Nate, and today we're going to be reading Chapter 1, Meanwhile, Out West. While the Civil War was being fought, and afterwards too, there was war in the West. It was the new settlers fighting the Indians, the buffalo, and nature for control of the land. The buffalo didn't have a chance, and nature is tough, but no match for people. 600-year-old trees got axed. Big areas, like the Wisconsin cutover, were left nude and unable to grow anything. A few people were beginning to worry about the environment, but hardly anyone listened to them. As for the Indians, they were intelligent and resourceful, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. They didn't have much of a chance either. The settlers had been fighting wars with the Indians since the Pequot War back in Massachusetts in 1631. The wars were all over the same thing: lands and who would control it. The Native Americans had been promised, in treaty after treaty, that if they would just move once more, they would be left alone. First, they were asked to move across the Appalachians, then west of the Mississippi. Now it was off all the good lands left in the West. Well, they wouldn't do it, but they weren't given a choice. At least, it wasn't much of a choice. It was move or fight. And that led to the 30 years of Indian wars in the West. You'll hear more about them. The outcome wasn't good for the Native Americans. Down here we have a picture. It says, "The buffalo, a vital part of many Indians' way of life, didn't have a chance against waves of new settlers moving to the West. Here passengers shoot at buffalo from a train. By the 1880s, there were fewer and fewer herds left to shoot." It is hard to blame the people who took their land. They were just ordinary people who had been told there was free land in the West, so they'd come and settle on it. Many had also been told awful, untrue stories about the Native Americans. They thought all Indians were savages and cruel and monster-like. They were terrified of Indians and wanted them all to disappear, and some Indians were killing innocent people. Besides, the settlers weren't having an easy time. Part of the problem was an economic depression in the East. It came on suddenly, and thousands of people were out of work. Many of them headed west across the Mississippi. But they found farming in the prairie lands different and difficult, much harder than farming in the East. Plains farmers needed to be able to stand up to extremes of heat and cold, and to violent storms. There was something else about this kind of farming that was important, and new to the Easterners. A big investment of capital, which means money, was needed for farm equipment and seeds. Many farmers weren't prepared. "In God we trusted, in Kansas we busted," said signs on the covered wagons heading back east. About 1/3 of the people who came west turned around and went back home. Up here we have a picture, and it says, "Lured by the prospect of cheap land from the 1860s on, many thousands of families, like the family shown here in Custer County, Nebraska, left their homes in the East to seek new lives in the West." Over here we have another picture. "When there weren't any trees, you burned dry buffalo chips. A Kansas woman brings home a barrelful." What are buffalo chips? But despite the hardships and the roller coaster economic conditions, mostly there was optimism. The midsection of the nation began to produce so much wheat it was called the nation's breadbasket. Western ranchers were raising cattle and sheep to put steaks and chops on people's dinner plates. Western miners were digging up important minerals. Railroads could take those products to far places. In the 1870s, no one knew quite where the nation was heading, but it was easy to see it was going in new directions, and fast. Cities were springing up everywhere. Ohio's cities were among the fastest growing. Chicago was the nation's busiest port. Chicago, a port? In the middle of the country? Look at a map and see how that could be. Factories spurred the growth in most cities. They produced affordable goods and jobs too, especially for the new immigrants. America's citizens were beginning to have comforts and possessions beyond anyone's dreams. Presidents and Congresses couldn't seem to keep up with all the new ideas, opportunities, and problems. But who could? Before the Civil War, the United States had been a midget in world affairs. Now it was in a growth spurt. Before long, the nation would be an industrial and agricultural giant. Up here we have a picture. Cargo ships on Lake Michigan take on their loads from grain elevators in Chicago. By the 1870s, Chicago was the busiest port in the United States. And over here, we have another caption that says, Nebraska became a state on March 1st, 1867. Colorado on August 1st, 1876. So here we have a map, and it says the American Prairie. And there's also a caption that goes with it. It says, America's prairie, the vast grassland in the center of the United States, was home to millions of bison, wolves, grizzly bears, and other animals, including several billion prairie dogs. During the late 1800s, farmers and ranchers transformed the grasslands into the richest agricultural region in the world.